weareagoda.com.
Okay, so every single year, there's this massive digital accounting that happens, and it basically defines every public school in California. It's this super high-stakes process that tells the story of the entire school year, and it just went through a huge change. Let's get into it. So, have you ever wondered how the state, and by extension, you and me, actually grades your local school? It's not just about test scores or graduation rates. Not really. The true story is way more complex, and you find it buried in the data. I want you to think of it like a digital story. Every single student, every absence, every program they're in, every disciplinary action, each one is a word, a sentence in that story. And as of right now, the deadline for writing that story just got a whole lot tighter. This whole process has a big official name: the California Longitudinal Pupil Achievement Data System End-of-Year Submission. Yeah, it's a mouthful. So insiders, just call it CalPADS EOY. And it's not just paperwork, you guys. It is the official data audit for the entire state. And the results? They directly impact a school's funding, its public reputation, and the kind of support its students get. Now, this is the part that's a huge deal. The process has been totally re-engineered. Starting in the 2025-26 school year, what used to be 4 separate data submissions spread throughout the year have been smashed together into just 2 much bigger submissions. This change puts an incredible amount of pressure on schools to get their data right from day one. And this slide, wow, it really lays out the new reality. The deadlines are now crammed into the summer, July 31st and August 17th. You know that window schools had for last-minute fixes? It's basically vanished. This forces a massive strategic change, away from that frantic end-of-year cleanup to what people are now calling continuous data governance. So let's dive into the first chapter of this data story, counting every student. And this is not just about a head count. It's about how this data makes sure that critical resources actually follow the students who need them the most. To really understand this, let's just look at one specific data point. It seems so abstract, right? Just a number. Code 191. What in the world could that possibly mean for a kid? Well, here's the human impact behind that code, and it is powerful. When a school correctly flags a student with code 191, it identifies them as experiencing homelessness. That single data point, that one click, automatically triggers their eligibility for free lunch. It gives them legal protections for immediate enrollment, and it makes sure they're counted correctly on the school dashboard. Honestly, getting this code right can be the difference between a student being seen and supported or being totally invisible to the system. So this is the fundamental question that school leaders have to ask. It's not about bureaucracy, it's a gut check. Is our data doing its job? Are the kids walking our halls getting every single resource that they are legally entitled to? All right, let's move on to chapter 2, because it all builds on itself. Now we're going to see how all this raw data gets turned into those public-facing performance scores. You know, the famous colors on the California school dashboard that parents and communities see. One of the biggest indicators right now is chronic absenteeism. Now, this isn't just about playing hooky. It's defined as any student missing 10% or more of the days they were enrolled, for any reason at all, excused or not. This chart here gives you that high-level, bird's-eye view of a school's attendance health. But the really savvy school leaders, they don't stop at the summary. They use reports like this one to drill down. Here, they can see individual anonymous students and their exact absence rates. You see these kids right here hovering just over that 10% line? This data lets leaders target help for those specific kids, which can change their entire school year and, in turn, change the school's overall performance color. The data also acts like a powerful mirror for equity. This chart is a perfect example of something called disproportionality. It's comparing the suspension rate for the general student population against the rate for students with disabilities. When one bar is way higher than the other, like you see here, it's a data-driven red flag that the state uses to see which schools might need some extra support and oversight. And yup, the system is absolutely used to enforce the law. For example, California has very strict rules that limit using willful defiance as a reason to suspend younger kids. And you better believe the CalPADS EOY data is the main tool auditors use to check if schools are actually following that rule. So if the data is this important, how do schools make sure their story is accurate? Well, that brings us to Chapter 3, Getting the Story Right. And with these new deadlines, it means shifting from a last-minute scramble to a year-long, continuous audit. So what kind of errors are they hunting for? Here's a classic example. School leaders have to cross-reference different reports. Like, does a student's suspension record match their attendance record? If a student is marked as suspended for 3 days, but the attendance data shows them present in class on one of those days, well, that's a data contradiction. It's a mistake that has to be fixed. So to handle all this, the most effective school leaders are adopting a totally new year-round cycle. This checklist kind of shows you the new playbook. It starts with constantly auditing data from the very first day of school. Then it moves into a pre-submission review in the spring, and finally into those intense certification windows in July and August. Being proactive like this is really the only way to win under the new timeline. Okay, let's bring this all home. Why does this deeply technical data story actually matter to everyone? It's about connecting these numbers to the things we all really care about: community trust, school funding, and of course, student equity. Here's the bottom line. The stakes are incredibly high. This data story directly feeds the public-facing school dashboard. It determines a school's eligibility for critical state and federal funding, it flags schools that need extra support, and it absolutely shapes how the community feels about its local schools. But most importantly, it is the mechanism that is supposed to make sure resources flow to the students who need them most. Ultimately, this whole thing is about telling the truth. I love how the source material puts it. Mastering this data ensures that the digital narrative of the school is a fair and accurate reflection of the incredible work that teachers, staff, and students are putting in and day out. Which really leaves us with one last question to chew on. If this data truly tells the definitive story of our public schools, are we, as parents, as community members, as citizens, listening closely enough to what it's trying to tell us?